I sat across from him in that conference room. The same conference room we had built together, from nothing. The same table we had signed our first client contract on. The same walls that held 8 years of my life. And he was smiling. Not a nervous smile, not a guilty smile, a confident one. The kind of smile a man wears when he is absolutely certain he has already won. He slid a document across the table toward me, a buyout offer. My half of the company, for less than what we'd made in a single quarter. He said, gently, almost kindly, "I think this is best for both of us, Rachel." That document sat on the table between us like a weapon he was certain I could not see. And I looked at it. I looked at his face, and I smiled back. Because what Daniel did not know was that I had been waiting for this exact moment. For 6 months, I had been silent, watching, collecting, building something he could never see coming. He thought he was ending me that day. He had no idea. He was walking into the last trap he would ever set. My name is Rachel, and this is the story of how I lost everything to my business partner, and then took back every single piece of it. Stay with me, because the ending, you will not see it coming. Let me take you back to where this really began. 12 years ago, I was 26 years old, fresh out of a marketing job I hated, with $1,700 in my savings account, and one idea I refused to let go of. I wanted to build a boutique event planning company. Corporate events, galas, product launches, high-end, personal. The kind of events where every detail tells a story. But I had no capital, no connections, and no one in my family who believed a young woman with no business background could pull something like that off. That is when I met Daniel. He was introduced to me through a mutual friend. He was charming, experienced, well-connected. He had spent years in corporate sales and knew how to get in front of the right people. I had the creative vision. He had the network. On paper, we were a perfect match. We launched the company together, 50-50 partners. Equal shares, equal responsibility, equal everything. The first 2 years were brutal. There were weeks we could not pay ourselves. Months where I worked 16-hour days and wondered if I had made the worst decision of my life. But I did not quit. I kept building, I kept showing up, and slowly, it worked. By year 4, we had a roster of 30 regular corporate clients. By year 6, we were generating over $2 million in annual revenue. By year 8, we had a team of 11 people, a beautiful office, and a reputation in our city that I was genuinely proud of. I had built something real. Daniel had too, and I never forgot that. I gave him full credit, always. I trusted him completely. He was more than a business partner. He was one of my closest friends. When my father passed away, Daniel was at the funeral. When I went through a difficult breakup, Daniel was the one who sat with me at that kitchen table at midnight and told me I would be okay. I trusted that man with my life, which is exactly why it took me so long to see what was right in front of me. The first sign came in the spring of year 8. I was reviewing our quarterly financials, something I did regularly, though I had always left the detailed accounting to Daniel, who handled that side of the business. And I noticed something small, a vendor payment, an amount that seemed slightly higher than what I remembered approving. I told myself it was probably nothing, a price increase, it's an extra service we had added. I made a note to ask Daniel about it, and then I forgot, because that week was insane. We had 3 events running simultaneously, a staff issue, and a client threatening to pull their contract. I forgot about that one line item. But the next quarter I noticed it again, a different vendor, a different number, same feeling in my stomach, that quiet, uncomfortable sense that something was slightly off. This time, I did not forget. I pulled up the last 18 months of vendor invoices on a Saturday morning, alone in the office, with a cup of coffee and a spreadsheet I built from scratch. And what I found changed everything. There were 14 vendor accounts in our system that I had never approved. Shell vendors, companies with no online presence, no addresses, no employees, just names and bank account numbers. And over the previous 18 months, we had paid those vendors a combined total of $237,000. I sat at that desk for a very long time. I did not call Daniel. I did not send an email. I did not do anything that might let him know I had found it. Instead, I closed the spreadsheet, finished my coffee, and began to think very carefully about what I was going to do next. Here is something I have learned about betrayal. The first wound is the discovery. That moment your mind understands what your heart is refusing to accept. That is painful, yes, but it is clean, sharp. It cuts fast. The second wound is the one that comes after. When you start asking yourself, how long, how deep, how much did I miss? That wound is a different thing entirely. I spent the next 3 weeks pulling on every thread I could find, Quietly, methodically, I told no one. Not our accountant, not our office manager, not my closest friend. I needed to understand the full scope before I moved a single inch. What I found was worse than I had imagined. The fraudulent vendor scheme was just the beginning. When I dug into the corporate accounts more carefully, I found that Daniel had also been billing several of our largest clients directly, bypassing our shared business account entirely and depositing those payments into a separate account under a slightly different company name, a name almost identical to ours, one letter different, the kind of difference you would never catch unless you were looking for it. Over 4 years, the total amount he had redirected was somewhere between $600,000 and $800,000. I had to sit with that number for a while. 6 years of my life, 6 years of 16-hour days, of missed vacations, of stress and sacrifice and absolute dedication. And he had been quietly stealing from what we built together the entire time. But that was not the worst part. The worst part came when I called my mother. My mother was a retired teacher, a gentle, trusting woman who had spent her entire life assuming the best of people. She lived alone in the house where I grew up, and she trusted me to look after her. I called her that evening to check in, as I did every week, and at the end of our call, almost as an afterthought, she mentioned that she had recently updated her will. I asked her, casually, carefully, what she meant. She said Daniel had come to visit her several times over the past year. She said he had been so attentive. He had taken her to lunch, helped her with some paperwork, told her he was worried about her financial security, that her current estate plan had some gaps, and that he had connected her with a financial advisor who could help. She told me she had put Daniel in charge of managing her investment portfolio. I could not speak for a moment. I asked her, as gently as I could, whether she had spoken with a lawyer before signing anything. She said the advisor Daniel introduced her to had handled everything. She said Daniel had told her it was better not to involve outside attorneys because it would only complicate things and cost her more money. I told her I loved her. I told her everything was fine. I said I would come visit soon. And then I hung up the phone and sat in my car in a parking lot for 45 minutes. Because what Daniel had done to our company was a crime, a serious one. But what he was doing to my mother, that was something I could not process as a business problem. That was personal in a way that nothing else had been. My mother, the woman who worked 2 jobs to put me through college, who clapped the loudest at every small victory of my life, who trusted everyone because she had never met a person like Daniel before. He had looked her in the eye. He had taken her to lunch. He had let her believe he cared about her. And he had been planning to steal from her too. That was the moment I stopped grieving. That was the moment I got very, very calm, and I made myself a promise. I would not confront Daniel until I had everything I needed to end this completely. Not just the business fraud, not just the money, every single piece of what he had done, documented and bulletproof, because I was not going to give him one chance to talk his way out of it. I had 6 months. I decided to use every single one of them. If you have been lied to by someone you trusted completely, someone who sat at your table, who knew your family, who looked you in the eye every single day, then you already know this feeling. That moment when the grief becomes something harder, something colder, something that does not need to be talked off a ledge. I was there now, and what I built over the next 6 months, he never saw a single piece of it coming. The first call I made was to a forensic accountant, not a regular accountant, a forensic accountant, someone who specializes in financial fraud, who knows exactly how to build a documented paper trail that holds up in court. I found her through a referral, met with her privately, and laid out everything I had found. She spent 3 weeks going through every account, every transaction, every vendor record. When she was done, she handed me a 74-page report. The final number, documented and verified, was $912,000, nearly $1 million, over 4 years, stolen from the company I had built with my own hands. But I did not act on it yet. I filed the report carefully and made my second call. I called an estate attorney, not one Daniel knew or had any connection to. I explained the situation with my mother without revealing my full plan. The attorney reviewed the documents my mother had signed, contacted the financial advisor Daniel had introduced her to, and within 2 weeks had identified the advisor as an unlicensed operator with a history of targeting elderly clients. The documents my mother had signed were technically legal, but deeply predatory. We were able to begin the process of having them voided. My mother did not fully understand what had happened. I kept it simple for her. I told her that the advisor Daniel had connected her with was not properly licensed and that we needed to make sure her accounts were protected. I did not tell her the rest. Not yet. She did not need to carry that weight. With my mother's situation being addressed quietly, I turned my attention back to Daniel. I want to be clear about something. During all of this, all 6 months, I showed up to work every single day. I sat across from Daniel in meetings. I had lunch with him. I answered his messages. I smiled at his jokes. Not because it was easy, because it was necessary. Every day I was at that office, I was also watching. I noticed which clients Daniel communicated with exclusively. I identified the 2 employees, both hired by Daniel personally, who seemed to handle billing irregularities without question. I documented email chains, flagged internal communications, and quietly began transferring key client relationships back under joint account management, which I explained to clients as a new internal process for quality assurance. None of them questioned it, because I was the one who had built those relationships in the first place. By month 4, I had quietly reestablished direct relationships with 22 of our 30 top clients. By month 5, I had restructured our banking access so that all incoming payments required dual authorization, a change I proposed in a routine operational meeting as a fraud prevention measure, which Daniel agreed to without blinking because he assumed I had no idea what had already been stolen. He was still smiling. He thought I was the creative one, the emotional one, the one who handled clients and colors and seating charts while he managed the real business. He had never once considered that I had spent 6 months becoming someone he had never met. In month 6, I had one final piece to put in place. I approached the 2 employees who had been processing the fraudulent transactions, separately, privately. I laid the documentation in front of each of them, not as an accusation but as a statement of what I already knew. I told them that I was working with a forensic accountant and an attorney, and that I was about to take formal action. I told them that the choices they made in the next 48 hours would determine whether they were witnesses or defendants. Both of them chose to be witnesses. Both of them provided signed statements. And that was when I called my attorney and told him we were ready. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday. Daniel had requested it. He had been trying to pressure me for several weeks about buying out my shares. He had started saying things like, "I think we have different visions for where the company is going, and maybe it's time we consider separating." At the time, I had smiled and said we could talk about it. I had told him to set up a formal meeting. He thought he was orchestrating a quiet exit for me. He thought he was going to hand me a lowball offer, and I would be so emotionally worn down that I would take it. He had been planning this for a while, I could tell. He was relaxed, he was prepared, he had that smile. What he was not prepared for was the 3 people sitting in the room when he arrived: me, my attorney, and a representative from the Financial Crimes Division of the District Attorney's Office. Daniel's smile lasted approximately 4 seconds. I did not raise my voice, I did not cry. I did not lecture him or make a speech. I simply sat with my hands folded on the table and let my attorney speak. The attorney outlined the fraud. Every vendor, every diverted payment, every fraudulent transaction, documented across 4 years, totaling $912,000. He presented the forensic accountant's report. He presented the employee statements. He presented the bank records. And then the representative from the DA's office explained what had been filed that morning. Daniel's face changed in a way I will never forget. The confidence drained out of it entirely. What was left was something I had never seen on him before. Fear. He tried to speak. His attorney, who he had called in a panic between our meeting invitation and the meeting itself, advised him to stay quiet, which he did. I looked at him one last time before I stood up. I said, "You asked me to sign a buyout offer for a quarter of what this company is worth. I want you to know, this company is mine now, all of it." And I left the room. The legal process moved faster than I expected. With the documentation I had built and the employee cooperation, the case against Daniel was essentially complete before it reached a courtroom. He negotiated a settlement, surrendering his 50% ownership share in full, agreeing to repay the $912,000 through structured payments drawn from his personal assets, and accepting a formal guilty plea on reduced charges that still carried real consequences. He lost his share of the company he had spent years trying to steal entirely. He lost the professional reputation he had spent his whole career building. And the financial advisor he had connected my mother to was separately investigated and charged. My mother's estate plan was fully restored. Her accounts were protected. She never lost a dollar now. I told you there was a twist. Here it is. About 3 months after everything was resolved, I was going through some old files, physical files, from the early years of the company, and I found something I had completely forgotten. A handwritten note from Daniel, dated the week we launched. It was a list he had made titled "Why This Will Work." And on that list, first item, in his own handwriting, was, "Rachel won't quit." He had written that down on the day we started. He meant it as a reason the business would succeed. He had no idea it was the reason he would lose everything. Today, the company is fully mine. The 11 people who work for me still have their jobs. The clients we built our reputation with are still with us. The office with those walls that hold 8 years of my life is still standing. And every single morning, when I walk through that door, I walk through it knowing that no one is ever going to take what I built from me again. Not because I got lucky, not because justice somehow showed up on its own, but because I made a choice. When I could have panicked, when I could have confronted him immediately, when I could have walked away. To be patient, to be methodical, to wait until I had everything. Here is what I want you to take from this. The most dangerous person in the room is not the loudest one. It is not the most aggressive one. It is not the one making threats. It is the one who already knows exactly what is going to happen next and is simply waiting for the right moment. If someone in your life has underestimated you, has looked at your trust, your kindness, your loyalty, and decided those things made you weak, let them keep thinking that. For now, if this story moved you, if some part of you recognized that feeling of being underestimated by someone who was supposed to be in your corner, subscribe to this channel. New stories every week. Stories about people who were counted out, who stayed quiet, who waited and won. You are not alone in this, and you are not finished yet. We will see you next time.